Welcome to the From Lab to Patient, Garage to Market podcast with your host, Phil Crowley. In each episode, we will discuss professionals serving the tech startup market and the various issues of importance to those companies. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, CrowleyLawLLC.com. Now here's the host of From Lab to Patient, Garage to Market, Phil Crowley.
Hello and welcome. Thanks for tuning into our podcast. You know, we look to bring you leaders in the technology and life sciences area who have perspectives to share to help you in your journey to entrepreneurship. You know, issues about how to succeed, issues to be aware of, to sort of demystify the process of taking your great ideas from the lab to the patient or from the garage to the marketplace. Today, I'm delighted to have as a guest Lou Steinberg. Lou is the founder and managing partner of CTM Insights, which is an early stage technology, cybersecurity, research lab, and incubator. And to say the least, Lou's on the frontier of innovation in the digital world. He's also a trustee at Stevens Institute of Technology in New Jersey, a major research institution, and is the chairman of the Research Enterprise and Technology Commercialization Committee. I don't think we could have found a better guest to have about the digital world. Lou, welcome to the program.
Thanks. Great to be here, Phil. If you couldn't find someone better, you didn't look that
hard. Lou, you're a champ. Say, Lou, tell us a little bit about your background, how you got into this area, and what's up with the sorts of things you're doing these days.
Yeah, sure. So I graduated from Stevens, and I cut my teeth in late 1980s, early 1990s at a little computer company called IBM. My team built the tech that ran the backbone of what we later called the internet. Had no idea at the time what it was going to become. But when we were done, the so-called NSF net that we were building ran about 900 times faster than the network it replaced, DARPANET. Mm-hmm. Turns out if you build a network, you have to be able to run it. And so I founded or led a series of startups that use data to understand operational risk, like outages and cyber. And in between those startups, I worked as a senior executive at large companies where we applied operational risk discipline. Most recently as the CTO at TD Ameritrade, the largest retail stockbroker on Wall Street. Since about 2017, I retired from corporate, and I've been focused on how to defeat emerging cybersecurity risks, limiting the damage of ransomware, securing data without encryption, things like that. And so I started CTM as a research lab to invent new solutions to kind of these emerging problems that we see getting worse in cyber. That's me.
Well, I know that you're addressing these risks in cyber, but based on a prior conversation, I know that you have some other suggestions and some other roadblocks that you see for innovation in the United States. You know, certainly issues with respect to taxation. Can you describe those a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So, and I'll use CTM as a good example. CTM is a startup that creates startups, right? So we invest in new ideas, the research part, build prototypes, file intellectual property, patents, and then either license that IP or spin out startups to leverage it. And we've had a pretty good run. But a few years back, they changed the tax code. And this impacts all startups, particularly in tech. And what they said was, this is called Section 174 of the IRS tax code, under the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, said that companies now have to start to amortize their research and development expenses. So even if you're a small company, typically on a cash basis, you have to spread the cost of your R&D out over anywhere from 5 to 15 years. Now, what that does is create an artificial bubble of revenue to tax. Because even though I've paid all my developers, I can only write a fraction of that off. And I've spent the cash on them. I actually paid people's salaries.
Right.
But they're going to pretend I didn't spend most of that money. They're going to count that as profit and tax it, even though I don't have it anymore. And so startups who are heavily investing in innovation and really plowing all of their revenue back into the company to build it will end up having a big tax bill, but don't have the cash because they actually spent that money to hire more engineers, more patents, a sales team. And so we in the United States are inadvertently discouraging innovation and R&D. You contrast that with China, where you can write off twice what you spend on R&D. Here you can write off 20%, maybe less. That's a problem.
I can certainly see that. It's certainly different from the situation in the life sciences, where it takes so long to get to an event where you're actually creating revenue that it's really grants, SBIR, Small Business Innovative Research Grants, or grants from the National Science Foundation, or additional infusions of equity, which is all non-taxable income that comes in to be spent and then amortized, as you've mentioned. So I can see where that is a natural pullback, although there are other provisions of the tax code that are helpful. I mean, one that our listeners should be aware of is Section 1202 of the Internal Revenue Code, that designates certain companies as qualified small businesses. And the good thing about being a qualified small business is that if you buy the stock originally from the company and hold on to it for at least 5 years, if you get a big winner and the company is bought out, the first $10 million of capital gains is exempt from federal income tax. So that's at least one area in which the federal government is trying to give an incentive. But as you point out, sometimes what the federal government gives with one hand, it takes away with the other hand. So negotiating government programs is something where I can see that innovators really should be talking to experts who can help them negotiate their way through those particular problems. Yeah. But you've identified a whole host of other operational problems, and I mean, the confluence and crossover of artificial intelligence and cybersecurity fascinates me. And how does that impact what you're doing and the sorts of problems that you get to deal with, Lou?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the first projects that we worked on at CTM actually came because of AI. I read an article in, I think it was the BBC, about some security researchers in Israel who hacked a CT scanner, like an MRI scan.
Whoa.
And they were able to use AI to insert or hide fake cancer. So they could make you, a radiologist read a scan and think you had cancer that you don't actually have, or not see cancer that you did.
Oh my goodness.
And we said, that's a problem, right? Imagine in healthcare a new kind of ransomware where the bad actors don't encrypt all your computers. They change your scans, they change your medical diagnoses, and they demand a ransom to tell the hospital which ones they got wrong, right? There's all kinds of other nefarious uses of that kind of technology. Maybe somebody's running for office. You want them to drop out. You make them think they're sick, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the first projects that we worked on was, don't tell me if a image like a scan has been manipulated. Tell me where it's been changed, and can we detect the fake cancer in the scan?
Mm-hmm.
Methods for doing that exist, but they're super inefficient. And we came up with an idea that ran 100 times faster than the state of the art. And so we filed for a patent on that. It was actually granted yesterday, even though that was like 5 years ago. It takes a while. But that was one of the very first projects we worked on related to AI. There's a lot of work we've been doing recently on deep fakes. How do I know you're you on a Zoom? We've seen fraud in Asia. There was a company in Hong Kong where some person in a finance team got on a Zoom with a half a dozen corporate executives from his company, and they directed him to wire money out. And he did. He was the only human on that Zoom. All of the others were artificially generated deep fakes that sounded and looked like executives in his company. So how can we tell what's real and what's not in a digital age? That's the kind of thing we've been working on.
That's certainly very scary to deal with. I know that FDA has promulgated some standards on the life sciences side with respect to security of the information technology systems that interface the kinds of devices about which you were speaking, Lou. Right. And there's certainly some guidance on that. Is encryption of all of that data the only way to deal with it, or does encryption not really help you when you're dealing with the kind of fakes that you're referring to?
It doesn't really help, because by the time you've encrypted it, it could have already been manipulated or generated. Mm-hmm. So we're looking at things like micro fingerprinting to see if little things have changed, or in the case of deep fakes, we're asking, are the words that I hear words that you said? And continuously signing and authenticating every word you speak into your microphone and checking it against every word coming out of my speaker to see if they match. And so these are sort of new approaches, because these are kind of new problems, and we need a different way to go after them. So encryption's probably not it. And with the rise of quantum computing, encryption may be on its way out anyway.
For those who are not familiar with this area, why would quantum computing sort of change the game about the typical types of encryption? I mean, for my firm, we make it mandatory to use multi-factor authentication to get into and out of our system. So you not only have to have your username and a password, but then the system sends you a code that you have to put in order to actually get into the system. How does quantum computing change the game?
Yeah, so that code is encrypted very often. We'll come back to that. Quantum computing says that, unlike a classical computer that would take thousands of years to brute force try every encryption, decryption key, quantum computing allows you to try them all at the same time. So instead of one at a time and taking forever to get to it, quantum allows multiple tests to be run in parallel, not serially, which means that I can try hundreds of thousands or 1 billion keys all at once and get an answer very quickly. Mm-hmm. That's why quantum is a compute problem. Once somebody has your encrypted data, they have your data.
Right.
It's just a matter of how long it will take them to try different keys until they find the right one. Imagine a key ring that has a whole lot of keys on it. You're trying to open a door, right? So with quantum, they can try all the keys together and find the right one.
Well, thanks for that explanation. That is the clearest explanation I've ever heard of quantum computing. I just want to take a minute now, Lou, to acquaint our audience with our law firm, Crowley Law. We're a boutique law firm of very experienced lawyers who are passionate about helping innovators in the life sciences and in other technologies realize their dreams. To take great ideas from the laboratory bench to the patient's bedside, or from the garage to the marketplace, with a view towards improving the lives of thousands or millions of people. We're passionate about it. As a former research scientist, I did my work in superconductivity. I'm acutely aware of how tough it is to generate new knowledge. I have tremendous regard for the innovators out there who work at doing that. And as an experienced corporate lawyer, I understand how difficult it is to take that new knowledge from the laboratory bench to the patient's bedside and to negotiate and overcome all the obstacles that stand in the way. And I and my lawyers are very dedicated to protecting founders and innovators from making the mistakes that in many cases can rob them of much of the value of the hard work that they put into it. In fact, I've got a book coming out in April of 2025 called Avoid Startup Failure: The Top 10 Causes of Failure for Technology Startups and How to Turn Them to Your Advantage. So please be on the lookout for that on Amazon. And I hope you'll read it. I hope you'll subscribe to this. We have a website, CrowleyLawLLC.com, at which we have a library of materials that are useful for startups and companies generally. And we invite you to go out there also to view our ebooks and white papers because we're dedicated to helping innovators. And just remember, we're here to help. Well, Lou, let's get back to your description of the fascinating stuff that you're doing. What's the project that you've done that was most interesting to you?
Well, so there have been a couple, and this AI deep fake thing is super interesting to me because it gets into trust, right? How do I know what to believe? It used to be, don't trust anything you read online, because anybody could say anything on the internet.
Right.
But if you see something with your own eyes and hear it with your ears, you tend to believe it. Now that people can generate realistic looking and sounding deep fakes and make someone say or anything, I can't believe my eyes or ears unless I was there in person when it happened. I can't believe anything digital.
Mm-hmm.
So what we want to do is bring back trust to the digital realm, which is rapidly losing it, right? Because, I don't know, there's a video online of Phil teaching ballroom dancing. I had no idea you were a ballroom dance instructor, right? You're not. It's anybody can make or Phil do that. And, you know, we've got an example where we've taken real interviews with some world leaders. And in the middle of the interview, had them say something they would never, ever say. And you can imagine how that might influence anything from an election to get people riled up around the position of someone they support, right? Mm-hmm. So this concept of degrading trust in society. My second favorite is actually something you mentioned a moment ago, Phil. It's you said you get a text code when you try to log in?
Yes.
Okay. MFA is a good thing to do, don't get me wrong. But It's broken. We're focusing too much on who you are and not what you try to do once you log in.
Mm-hmm.
And what we care about is if somebody gets in claiming to be Phil, are they doing things that Phil would not want done? So did Phil really want to wire $1 million to Kuala Lumpur at 2 a.m, right?
Right.
That fraud is not a who, that's a what. It's a bad transaction. And so,
Right.
so we took those codes and flipped them around and said, the code shouldn't come from a machine to go to Phil to go back to the machine. When Phil wants to do something, he should create a code that authorizes that action, like sending money or releasing a client's records to a third party, right? So we think that the codes are coming from the wrong side. If you want to do something, you should authorize it. And that's not authentication, that's authorization.
I see. Isn't that what blockchain is all about, Lou?
Blockchain is just a database that everybody can see.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to put an authorization on it. I am allowing this to happen.
Right.
And that's like the king's signet ring in the wax, where you've now permitted something to happen under your authority. We need to get away from who you are and focus more on what you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
So that's probably my second favorite one, and it's a topic you just mentioned.
And what about the difficulties of creating robust IT architectures in an increasingly complex environment, an environment subject to attack at many levels and vulnerabilities at many levels? You've had a wonderful experience of being at big companies that have massive issues, as well as small companies that are tremendously innovative. How do you see that paradigm working out in terms of using network architecture, perhaps, as a means of assisting companies in better protecting themselves?
Absolutely. Complexity is the enemy of availability.
Mm-hmm.
And the enemy of security. We take big IT infrastructures, and maybe we've done some acquisitions and bolted them on, and we bought some tools and we've quickly integrated them to get something out to market. But we've lost architectural consistency. So now we've got 25 flavors of databases, and gateways to gateways to gateways, and dependencies that we didn't even know existed, right? I once saw a trading system go down because somebody had a server literally under their desk and they kicked the power cord, and it created sort of a cascading failure, and a trading system went out, right? That shouldn't happen. That was a dependency that mapped. So what architecture gives you is a set of standards to apply.
Mm-hmm.
that drives both consistency and simplification. And with that, it turns out you get much stronger resiliency and a much simpler footprint to try to secure from a cyber point of view. Because with cyber, you got to patch all of the potential holes. All the bad actor needs to do is find one. You got to fix all, right? The more you can simplify, the easier it is to manage your attack surface. And so architectural standards are absolutely the key to simplification.
What about for smaller companies that don't have that huge architecture and may simply be using cloud-based services like Microsoft Office or some other databases, CRM databases, and that sort of thing? Are there any best practices that you can articulate for companies that are of a smaller size, have less sophisticated needs? What can they do?
Yeah, there are a few things. The first thing is, remember what we're trying to protect: your data. And so You have to know where your data is and what it is, right? Is it living in the cloud? Who has access to those S3 buckets or OneDrives, right?
Mhm.
The most critical stuff should be maybe behind a firewall on-prem, where you've got a little more visibility and control. So number one is know what you have where. Number two is know if sensitive data is leaving your control. It's what in security we call data exfiltration.
Mhm.
When someone wants to steal your IP, they have to suck your data out of your bubble, whether it's cloud or on-prem.
Right.
When ransomware runs, one of the first things they try to do is steal data and threaten to publish it if you don't pay the ransom, right?
Mhm.
So knowing if data is going to a command and control server in Moscow in the middle of the night turns out to be a really helpful thing, right? The simplest controls, MFA, you mentioned before, good
Right.
stuff. Any remote access system needs MFA, right? It was a remote access Citrix server that led to Change Healthcare being hacked, which took down a big part of the healthcare economy for a month, right?
Mhm.
So that's one. Two, do an inventory. And three, put in alerts that will tell you if your data is leaving. Those three things would help a lot.
How do you do that, though? How do you put in alerts that tell you that your data is leaving when you're resource constrained, you're an individual innovator, maybe you have a couple of other technology-friendly, technology knowledgeable people who are in the company? What sort of tools are available to do that?
Yeah, there are a lot of tools. Just most small companies don't know to ask for them, right? If you Google data exfiltration detection,
Mhm.
you'll find a list of tools that plug into your Office environment or your O365 and OneDrive environment or your AWS environment. If you're geeky, because you're a startup and you're in tech, you could probably configure the firewalls that come with some of these services to alert you on new outbound data connections.
Mhm.
If not, just Google it. These tools are out there, they exist, and they add so much value.
Are they expensive to license in and integrate, Lou?
Well, like all tools, there's a range, but for the most part, no. You can even roll your own, like I said. Um, and it's certainly not as expensive as losing your intellectual property, which
Oh,
your audience knows probably better than most how valuable that is.
well, and then there are the legal implications of that, because with all the state level privacy laws
Right.
and some laws at federal level with respect to particularly information on financial transactions, companies may have substantial risk of having to spend a lot of money to notify people, to provide for credit monitoring, to do some other things to help people monitor any attacks on their credit, any potential theft of identity, and all that sort of thing, which is extremely important. And then it implicates again having appropriate cyber insurance in place. And these days, what I hear from the insurance brokers with whom I deal is that companies are being much more particular about who they will even insure, and taking people through detailed questionnaires about what sorts of systems and procedures are in place and who's responsible for cybersecurity, so that unless a company shows that it is actually actively working in this area, they may not even be able to obtain insurance for this.
That's right. And it's expensive if you can get it. The price keeps going up of cyber insurance. The issue with those questionnaires is they'll ask, do you use firewalls? Do you use a CASB? Do you use multi-factor authentication? What they don't know is, do you use it well? So I can check a whole lot of boxes, but it doesn't get to the root of, are you protected? And so for that reason, I think there's a place for cyber insurance, but that should not be your main control. You want to prevent what you can and respond to what you must, but not recover afterwards. That's a bad place to be.
Well, Lou, this has been a fascinating discussion. The time has really flown by. If people want to get a hold of you and CTM Insights and learn more about these fascinating topics, how can they get in touch with you?
Go to our website, ctminsights.com is the easiest way. And there are links to contact us, and we'd be happy to respond.
Super, Lou. Thank you so much. And thank you to our audience for tuning in. Again, to the extent that you have questions about startups, anything related to technology and life sciences startups, please feel free to reach out to us. Visit our website, crowleylawllc.com, or send us a note, info@crowleylawllc.com. Just remember, we're here to help. Thanks.
You've been tuning into the From Lab to Patient, Garage to Market podcast with your host, Phil Crowley. You can find this show on all the major platforms, including YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and on our website, crowleylawllc.com. If you found this information helpful, please subscribe, like, leave a positive review, and share with others.